Humans stand out from other living beings by their remarkable creative ability. In most cases, it is used for prosperity and technological breakthroughs that improve living conditions. However, in earlier times, human creativity was used to concoct terrible methods of torture and execution, some of which we list in today's video. The bronze bull was invented by a Greek sculptor named Curiosities of Athens between 570 and 554 BC. This bull was an instrument of torture during the reign of Phalaris, a tyrant of Acragas, Sicily. Curiosities designed the bull hollow on the inside and a bonfire underneath. Victims were burned alive, and smoke came out of the bull's snout, which was filled with incense to counter the smell of burning flesh. Supposedly, inside the statue were some internals that distorted the sound of the victim's screams, turning them into a kind of angry roar of a bull. The bronze bull was not only used by the Greeks. The Romans also adopted it and used it to torture many people. It is speculated that some famous Christians, such as Saint Eustace and Saint Antipas, were killed by the bronze bull. Crucifixion was a common punishment in ancient times, used by many different cultures. Tens of thousands of people were crucified in various regimes and rulers for over 1,000 years. Crucifixion was widely used by the Persians, Romans, Carthaginians, and Macedonians. The practice began in the 6th century BC, probably originating with the Assyrians and Babylonians, and continued until the 4th century AD. The victim was stripped naked and whipped. As part of the public humiliation, he was carried through the city streets. At the site of execution, the victim would be tied or nailed to a wooden cross beam, which would then be connected to a vertical pole. The person was hung there until he died of exhaustion and asphyxiation. As the first Christian emperor of Rome, Constantine I banned crucifixion in the empire out of respect for Jesus Christ. Boiling was a slow, agonizing punishment. In this method, the victim was gradually lowered or thrown into a large vessel with boiling oil, water, or even wine and molten lead. If the shock of pain did not immediately render the victim unconscious, the person experienced the excruciating sensation of having the outer layers of skin utterly destroyed by immersion burns, followed by the total failure of the organs, which were eventually cooked by the heat. A gruesome fate supposedly in store for the worst of murderers, but historical documents refute this idea. The Emperor Nero is said to have annihilated thousands of people in this way. And, in the Middle Ages, the main targets of punishment were not murderers, but coin counterfeiters, especially in Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. One of the cruelest means of torture in history is known as the wheel, or breaking wheel. This ruthless torture, commonly used in the ancient world, was reserved for public executions. There were different variations, but the prisoner was usually tied to a large wooden wheel with spokes, such as that used on transport carts. The goal was not to swiftly kill the condemned, but to severely mutilate them. The executioner would start by breaking the leg and arm bones. The victim would be beaten almost to death, crushing all his bones with an iron bar. When the process was over, the condemned was repositioned on the wheel so that his heels came together at the back of his head. Then, the wheel was raised on a pole, and the dying criminal was bled to death or even eaten by birds. Probably created by the Babylonians, impalement was an execution method to punish criminals. Impalement would drive a sharp wooden rod into a criminal's body before lifting them vertically and allowing gravity to slowly pull them to the ground again. The wooden rod would eventually pierce the victim's body, exiting through the head, shoulders, or back. This caused a death preceded by hours of excruciating and humiliating pain. This method of execution was used all over the world at one point in history, but is often associated with Central and Eastern Europe. Wars between European peoples and Ottoman forces were brutal. Vlad the Impaler was a Romanian prince whose alias is due to his tendency to punish enemies through impalement. Flaying has a long and grotesque history. Documents about the practice exist as far back as the Neo-Assyrian Empire, but it eventually became part of most civilizations, among them those of medieval Europe and in the human sacrifices of the Aztecs in Mexico. Several flaying techniques were used in different cultures, but the basis was always the same: to slowly and painfully slice the skin of the body, keeping the victim alive for as long as possible. The Assyrian period sculptures show that the process started with incisions on the thighs. In the European method, the first step was to peel the skin off the feet and legs. Death usually resulted from severe blood loss and shock. But in unfortunate cases where experienced skinners were used, the victim could be left alive in perpetual agony for several days before finally succumbing to the hopelessly infected wounds. Although it is highly debated whether this method of torture happened or was merely a literary invention, the ritual known as blood eagle was first mentioned in late skaldic poetry. The victim would lie face down and be kept alive when the back was cut off, the ribs were separated from the spine, and the lungs pulled through the opening to form a pair of bloody wings. If the Viking sagas are correct, this execution technique was one of the most brutal, painful, and terrifying ways to die. The earliest account of this practice was recorded in 867 AD, when the Viking Ivar the Boneless, son of the famous Ragnar Lothbrok, condemned the king of Northumbria to die by blood eagle, punishing him for killing Ragnar by throwing him into a pit full of poisonous snakes. The ancient Romans are known for public events with gladiator fights in arenas, but there was also a method of execution called condemnation to beasts, which was not only a way to deal with criminals, but also entertainment for the Roman masses. The death sentence, where the victim was thrown to lions, tigers, leopards, and other exotic big cats, was the execution method chosen by the Romans and much appreciated by the spectators. As a rule, it was punishment for the worst criminals, such as murderers, fugitive slaves, or those who stirred up uprisings. The condemned were led into an arena unarmed. Then, the animals were unleashed to attack the condemned. The big cat would quickly kill the victim and then move on to the next target. The highest recorded death toll by a lion was 200 at an event in the Colosseum. Forcing a condemned man to ingest molten, glowing metal was a fairly common method of execution in ancient times. The victim was imprisoned or tied up. His mouth would be open as the heated metal was poured down his throat. This caused severe damage to the internal organs and blistering of the lungs, leading to almost immediate death. In 1599, native Indians of the Javaro tribe in the Peruvian Andes captured a Spanish governor and executed him by pouring liquid gold down his throat. The Roman general and politician Marcus Licinius Crassus was also forced to ingest molten gold when the Parthians captured him. It is said that they did this to symbolize Crassus's thirst for wealth. In ancient Israel, the Mosaic law held that this method was applicable to 36 crimes. Those guilty of adultery with the daughter of a priesthood member were executed with molten lead. Considered by many to be one of the worst execution methods of antiquity, rat torture laid a starving rat in a bucket on the stomach or bare chest of the victim. The bucket was heated by embers on the outside, and the panic-crazed animal would chew its way out through the flesh of the unfortunate victim. The rat would quickly make its way through the victim's guts, causing unbearable agony. In addition to the unimaginable pain, the victim also suffered from the sickening horror of feeling the large, filthy creatures squirming inside their entrails as they died. Although it is primarily associated with Elizabethan England, rat torture was reportedly used frequently until the 1980s by military governments and intelligence agencies in Latin America.